Welcome into Green Dot Daily, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Charlie DiSturco, and today on the show, it's a Darty over at Madison Square Garden. Yes, we're going to talk Panthers and Rangers Game 5 tonight, but there's also the U.S. Darts Masters this weekend at the Mecca. Michael Leboff joins to break down more on that in a bit. Plus, Jim Turvey and I cook up a little same game parlay for Mavs Wolves Game 5 as well. But the question swirling around the NBA all week has been, can the Timberwolves be the first team in 156 tries to erase a 3-0 deficit and win? While there's still a few more games left for Ant & Co., here's a look at those 4 teams that were able to at least force that win or go home bout. Most recently, we saw the Celtics last year fall down 3-0, and right when we finally thought that history would happen, Jason Tatum and co could not take down Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. The only NBA Finals 3-0 lead to end in 7 came all the way back in 1951 between the Knicks and Rochester Royals. My grandpa had the Rochester Royals money line in that one. It was a big, big win for him on that night. So that's a perfect time for me to turn it over to our president of buckets, Matt Moore. He also had boots on the ground in that Game 7 in 1951, and now he's here for his weekly State of the Union address. Matt?
All right, thank you, my young whippersnapper. Thanks for joining us, NBA fans. Glad to be with you. As I do every week for the State of the Union, we're going to give you the good, the bad, and the other. Let's talk about the good. How about the Wolves finally making some adjustments? So it may just seem sure that helped, but a bigger part of it is that the Wolves are slowly starting to move towards some actual adjustments in the series that are getting them closer to the matchups that they need. The number of times that Jaden McDaniels has guarded Luka Doncic has steadily decreased and then dropped off a cliff in Game 4. And you go, well, wait, Jaden McDaniels is a great defender. Why don't you want him on Luka? Because Luka bodies him, because Jaden's 190 pounds and Luka is a chunky boy. And so he just puts that shoulder into him and gets to that step back, and it's a problem. So in Game 4, they put Anthony Edwards on Luka full time, and then Jaden McDaniels focused on Kyrie Irving. And it's not a coincidence that Kyrie was one of the ones that actually vanished in that game. Luka had a bad game. Kyrie was taken out. That's a pretty significant change there. So the Mavericks need to wrap this series up. If they let this linger, the Wolves are getting closer and closer to finding actual answers. So I think there's a little bit of urgency here for Dallas to go ahead and wrap this up. If this gets to 6, it's going to be, I think, scary times for the Mavericks, even though no one's ever lost a 3-0 lead. By the way, one more thing that's pretty helpful. Karl-Anthony Towns no longer playing like he's completely headless. And by that, I mean he's hit shots because he's still fouling like he cannot help himself. It's compulsive. Please, Karl, seek help. It's a problem. As far as the bad, how about this finals schedule? They don't start till the 6th. So if this game ends tonight, we still get a week between games. I kind of get the idea because you look at the NFL and they do 2 weeks of coverage before the Super Bowl and a whole week of Super Bowl week and Radio Row and all that. Guess what? NBA is not that. That's not how this goes. You want to carry over momentum, and having a week of guys just sitting around getting asked the same questions every single day gets really stale and boring because we're going to be talking about that instead of the actual basketball going on. And that's a little bit of a problem. One more thing on this. When the finals do begin, if the Celtics lose Game 1, don't talk about rest versus rust. The Celtics have had plenty of time before Game 1 of every single series that they've been in. They had time before Game 1 of the playoffs and versus the Cavs and then versus the Pacers. Hasn't been a problem for them so far. So maybe let's not go ahead and pretend if they lose that, oh, well, they were just rusty. No, don't do that. If they lose, it's because the Boston Celtics have a propensity for losing games they shouldn't. Let's start just right there and skip over rest versus rust.
You know, it's interesting, Matt. You mentioned the days off for Boston. It's at 9 for the NBA Finals. And then you look at it, and I'm watching TV for him. I've been betting his points over every single game. And as Albert Einstein likes to say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. Maybe Karl Towns can finally get everything underway. He finally scored in Game 4. But what's one other thing that we should look for in the NBA?
So if tonight is the last game of the Western Conference playoffs, that also means it's the last episode of Inside the NBA, as the NBA is reportedly pretty much locked into new deals with Amazon Prime and NBC, and not a deal with TNT going forward. Charles Barkley's made lots of jokes about updating the resume, etc. And it's certainly possible that Inside might get picked up with all of its key components on another network. But if it doesn't, it's important to remember that one, the show was great for a long, long time, and you can have your kind of preferences on which era was kind of the best. I'm of the opinion it was at its best before Shaq joined. Love Shaq. He's amazing. He's a great entertainer. Check out the Shaq podcast, the big podcast over on Playmaker. But I do think the dynamic kind of changed when Shaq was able to just lord the rings over the other two. And that to me is kind of a problem. But the other thing to kind of remember here is that change is good. We need something fresh and new in NBA coverage, and we definitely need something that's actually going to celebrate the game. There's been a lot of discussion about the recent way that the NBA is covered, in both TNT with its who he played for, and we never watched that team, and ESPN with just, well, basically talking about LeBron and where Giannis is going to get traded to nonstop while Stephen A yells something. Both of them have fallen into traps a little bit of how their content is produced and cycles that they're stuck in. So it's good to have Amazon Prime, NBC, or whoever else gets in on the action have these opportunities to provide something fresh and new. I think that's pretty important. I think the NBA and its content partners need to learn the lesson and actually focus a little bit on the basketball. Look, trades, free agency, all that stuff, it's part of what makes the NBA great. That drama is part of what makes fans so excited for it. It's an inherent part of it. And you can talk about that in ways that don't take away from the game. But if we're going to do anything with taking away from the end of Inside and TNT's coverage, I actually have one more specific request. For the love of God, make sure Kevin Harlan stays on NBA coverage. He's the best NBA announcer that we've had since Marv Alberts. I think he's the GOAT. Kevin Harlan has got to stay on NBA coverage. I will do whatever I have to make sure that this happens. If I have to go pick it outside somewhere, I will do it. We got to keep Kevin Harlan on NBA broadcast. It's absolutely imperative with no regard for human life.
We need to see you live tweet when this all goes down and Kevin Harlan doesn't go like you do during a normal game, but just Kevin Harlan, Kevin Harlan, Kevin Harlan, Kevin Harlan. One thing I will say is that you mentioned, change is good. I agree with that. The best announcers, and I hate the NBA for the most part, the best announcers do come from the NBA, Harlan, Mike Breen, Ian Eagles. So if one of those three end up calling the games, that's all I need to see. But Matt Moore, thank you so much for hopping on for your weekly State of the Union. We'll hear from you soon, Mr. President.
God bless everyone except Charlie, and God bless the NBA.
Sticking on the hardwood, and let's take a look at the most bet props ahead of Game 5 between the Mavericks at all this series each game. But he is over 5.5 in 3 of those 4 games. No Luka or Anthony Edwards over on points, but bettors are targeting them in different ways. Perhaps most interesting, Anthony Edwards is under 6.5 assists. One of the most bet props of the night, despite him going over in each of the 4 games this series. The public also expecting a big PJ Washington day with 2 of his props being among the most bet. So I mentioned the same game parlay being concocted earlier, and here Jim Turvey is to join me, and we're going to build a 3-leg parlay for Game 5, plus a little bonus prop out in the WNBA if you want to get a little bit crazier with a 4th leg. All right, Jim, it's 3-1 Timberwolves, or 3-1 Mavericks, rather, in this series. The Timberwolves home, 4.5-point favorites. You'll start, I'll give a 2nd leg, and then you can round us out. Where are you heading for the 1st leg of this same game parlay?
Yeah, 1st leg, we're going to go Daniel Gafford, 6.5 rebounds. I'm going to take the over here. You and I were talking about this. Derek Lively is listed as questionable right now. I really don't see any way in which he plays. I think this is a little bit of gamesmanship potentially. We saw the hit that he took. That looked incredibly serious. This is a road Game 5. I think you try and save him and get all your ducks in a row for that potential Game 6. Maybe take, a free roll here in Game 5. You're still up 3-1. You don't have to be too nervous just yet. If he doesn't play, this is a great number. If he plays, I even still like this number. His minutes have been up because of the Lively injury. He played a playoff high 31 minutes in the last game, and he had 8 rebounds. However, even if Lively is in the lineup, there's a couple routes to still hitting this. One, he could be in the lineup and you give it a go, and then it's like, no, this isn't working. We're going to go back to Gafford mostly. We'll limit Lively's minutes here and there. The other is that Gafford actually hasn't been collecting as many rebounds as, by potential rebounds he potentially should be. He's only collecting 42.4% of his potential rebounds this series. For the season with Dallas, he was up around 48%. So he's actually gotten a little bit unlucky on the boards, and he's sitting right around this number anyways. add in a questionable Lively that you and I think both think is maybe less than likely to play. And I really like Gafford's rebound prop here for game 5.
Yeah, Lively was on the floor in the shoot around this morning. He remains questionable, with the Mavericks calling this a neck sprain. And Lively said, we're not going to call it pain. We're going to call it discomfort. But I agree with you. I'm not sure how he suits up. You look at that injury. I might be out for the next month. Someone else would be at to host this show. But I like this look here. Daniel Gafford, obviously, I targeted him in the OKC series. We've seen 2 of the games so far, him get close to that 10 rebound mark. I would not be surprised to see him get a double-double if Lively is out of this game. And even with him in, I think we should see a little bit more minutes kind of tend toward Gafford's way, given Lively being reintroduced back into the lineup. But my second leg, let's go back to All Reliable. And if you follow me in the Action app, I've logged this every single Minnesota offense when it comes to success. We saw in that game 4 when Karl-Anthony Towns came back in that second half, when he wasn't being an imbecile, making so many dumb fouls, he was a disruptor. And, you know, he played the first couple of games, looked come off, couldn't make a 3 to save his life, finally got his stroke under his belt. I think the biggest thing is, and we go back to this Lively injury, even for Karl Towns as well, Lively not being in the paint allows for more drives from Anthony Edwards and kicks to Towns. It allows for Towns to also be less scared of driving in and getting blocked by whoever it is there. And he feels more comfortable attacking Daniel Gafford, like Anthony Edwards as well. So we might see more opportunities in that. It's just the one thing I got to ask for Karl Towns is please don't foul. I mean, some of these plays are so stupid, but despite the struggles, he's still averaging 17.5 points a game in the series, and he's over 3 of 4 games against Dallas in the regular season. I'm going to keep going to this well here until the series ends. And maybe it's a good thing if the series ends tonight and he doesn't go over, because I'm just firing away like it's nothing, Jim. But I'm going to go with him as our second leg here. Wouldn't even mind alt lines. I think we're finally seeing Karl Towns get his legs under him.
Yeah, I mean, Cat with him, it's can he stay on the court and can he kind of keep his head on straight? And we have seen it at times this postseason. At times it's looked like he finally has got everything clicking and he's good to go. And then at other times it's a little less so. So I'll ride along with it. My final leg is I'm going with the people here. I'm going PJ Washington. I'm going to do the full points, rebounds, and assists. So I'm going to go over 19.5 here. Similar deal here. I like this. Even if Lively plays, I really like it if Lively's out. You and I both think this questionable maybe is a little bit of a funky tag. But here's the deal with Washington. He's sitting at 19.6 PRA, despite shooting terribly this postseason, especially this series, actually. The postseason as a whole, he's actually shot pretty well. This series, he's had a lot of open looks, hasn't been able to knock them down. He's at 36.4% from the field overall, 22.2% from 3. Those are down. Regular season, he was at 43.6 and 32%. And we saw before this series, he actually was having some of his best shooting that he's had. He was shooting 45.3% from the field and 40.7 for 3. He's getting clean looks. I think it's a matter of a couple of these falling. This, to your point on the alts, this could be another way of, you know, if Washington really goes out, really goes off, these numbers can be got by him. We saw him have some monster games against the Thunder. He really hasn't done it this series yet. If he does, that's going to be big for Dallas. Another benefit for him to Lively being out. Last game was a playoff high in minutes for him. Again, we think Lively's out, but right. I like it even if Lively is on there. Multiple routes, kind of a similar play, again correlated with Lively being out as well.
Right. I we talked about this quickly offline too. Like, I was debating his over points if I had to give another leg in this one because of how bad he's been shooting. And the other thing that you mentioned, or you didn't mention, is the Timberwolves putting McDaniels on Kyrie has led to the highest 3-point output from PJ Washington this series. He took 9 threes. I think that with Jaden being all over Kyrie, it's going to lead to Dallas having to find scoring options from someone else. You take away the alley-oops from Lively, the attention on Kyrie, the attention on Luka. Someone has to step up in this offense. And we saw last series, it was PJ Washington. We've seen the whole shooters shoot mantra. He is not afraid. He's going to keep ripping it. So I love this one too. I was looking offline. I was like, PJ Washington ladder. Karl Towns ladder. Maybe put it together and make a little lottery ticket. That's where my mind was going. But I love this one. So the 3-leg parlay that we have put together, PJ Washington over 19.5 PRA, Karl-Anthony Towns over on points, and Daniel Gafford over on rebounds. if Derek Lively's out, I feel pretty good about this one. If he's in, I still feel pretty good. But of course, if you want to sweeten the deal up a bit, you want to get those odds up, you're like a Michael Leboff. You need more to this parlay. We do have the Storm versus the Fever tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Storm, 5.5-point favorites. And you're targeting a certain player on the Storm to have a great day.
Yeah, Skylar Diggins-Smith over 15.5 points. So Skylar season is back. She's had a couple of rough games to start the season, but this Storm team is starting to gel. They've really looked at like some of their best basketball the last few games, and a lot of that is because Skylar is playing some of her best basketball. Those first 5 games of the season, she's shooting 30.3% from the field. Last 2 games, she's at 13 of 21. That's over 62%. She's not going to maintain that, but she's also not going to sit down at 30%. She'll meet somewhere in the middle, and I have this number projected around 17.5 instead. Fever give up the most points per game, and they also are going to now be without Erica Wheeler for this game, who's their best backcourt defender, as well as Temi Fagbenle, who's been just a solid all-around piece for them. The Fever also send their opponents to the line the most, and I really think that a key part of Skylar's game is when she's able to get to free throw line, she's able to get into rhythm. Last game out, she got to the line a season high 7 times. I think we see more of that. I think she's really aggressive against this Fever backcourt. It really has a lot of question marks defensively. This number is just a little bit too low for me. I'm on the Storm in general. The opening number they hung for this was a little bit crazy. They actually had the Fever favored by 1. It's now up to Storm, I believe 5.5 last I saw. So this looks like the market's really on Seattle. And I think one of the ways we see that come through today is that Skylar has herself a good scoring night.
Yeah, so there we go. The 4 legs, if you want to. Skylar Diggins-Smith, the last one of the 4. Leg 1, Daniel Gafford, a reminder, over rebounds. Cat, over 20.5 points. I'm insane, maybe, but I'm going to keep doing that. And then PJ Washington over on his PRA as well. Jim Turvey, best of luck on the action tonight. Hopefully we can cash the same game parlay, but enjoy the games.
Yes. So talk to you later, Charlie.
Over to the pucks, and here's a look at the Game 5 market report between the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. Remember, the series tied at 2 apiece following Florida's overtime win. The line opened at -105 Rangers, but has flipped with some sharp money coming in on those road Florida Panthers. The public, though, remains bullish on the Rangers holding serve at home, with 60% of the money coming in on New York. The over 5.5 also getting the majority of the money, despite there being 5 or less goals in all but 1 game thus far. So keeping that in mind, we bring in Michael Leboff, NHL expert, here to the show. So Mike, I got to ask you, Dallas, they were up 2-1. New York also up 2-1. Both were the underdogs entering their series, and then game 4 all of a sudden evened up. Which team would you put more in, like, oh, we're in trouble, Dallas or the Rangers?
Yeah, I think it's Dallas, and it just comes down to an injury situation for the Stars, right? There's a team that's built on depth. That's how they win. They can roll 4 lines and 3 defensive pairings, and everyone has a specific role. They're suited for that role. And now that Chris Tanev, who is questionable at best for the rest of the series after blocking a shot in game number 4 in Edmonton, is out, that's going to put some struggling players into bigger roles, notably Ryan Suter, and cause the Stars to lean pretty heavily on guys like Miro Heiskanen, Thomas Harley, and Esa Lindell. Those guys can handle the assignment, but it just does take away from what Dallas's biggest strength was, not just overall, but in the series, right? Like they are the deeper team against Edmonton. Edmonton's pretty top heavy. They just want to tread water when their big guns aren't out there, and Dallas wants to win every shift basically, and it becomes a lot harder without Tanev. So it's not. I wouldn't say either team should be in panic mode. It's 2-2. They both have home ice advantage in the best 2 of 3 that's now unfolding. But I do think Dallas, especially because we just know that the Rangers are masters at hanging around and nicking wins.
It really feels like, the Rangers somehow, despite being outplayed in, probably 2 or the last 3 games, have been able to at least force overtime. They've won 2 of those 3 overtimes. In Dallas, it felt like that 2-0 lead in last night's game was their best shot, going up 3-1 and then having to hold serve for just, 1 more win. But definitely interesting here, and both obviously underdogs right now entering the final stretch here despite the home ice. But let's talk tonight's game. Panthers, Rangers, 8 p.m. Rangers back at Madison Square Garden. How are you attacking this game?
Yeah, this has been a funny series from a betting perspective because I think that on the road the Rangers have held some value. They were in the plus 140 or longer range for Game 4. I thought that was a little crazy, even though they were outplayed and lost. So you'd say technically the right bet was the Panthers because they tick both those boxes. But at the same time, when you're now in this matchup, you are seeding the fact that they're probably going to lose the ice tilt battle, especially at 5-on-5, and it's whether or not Igor Shesterkin keeps them in the game long enough to allow one of their high skilled players to create a moment of magic. Right now, it's most likely been Alexis Lafreniere because the other stars are having some quiet series, but they're hanging around. Like the series is 2-2. I think what you said is pretty fair. That most people would agree the score line, if all things were equal and justice was served, like the Panthers would probably be up 3-1 in the series, but that's not how it goes, and that's what the Rangers do. So rather than play into the number, I think that the Panthers would be I'd be closer on the Panthers at like minus 125 if it's minus 120 or better, maybe a bet on the Panthers. But I like this to be a very quiet first period for a couple of the reasons I just said, right? Like the Rangers need to stabilize. They need to have themselves a game where they can breathe, they can get the puck out. They're not taking these long minute plus shifts in their own zone defending. So I think a pretty crisp effort right out of the gates from the Rangers will be expected. And the Panthers have no issue playing into that style too. We've seen it at the Garden twice that these two teams have no problem getting into a staring contest. So I think that if you go under or the first period exact score 0-0, first period to end scoreless, under 0, under half a goal in the first period, however your book lists it. If you can get better than plus 300 on that, I like that bet quite a bit because I do think that this thing starts very stodgy.
I love how you got to go with the plus money. You can't just take the 1.5 goals. It's got to be a step further, a 0 goal scored. But I do want to ask you because you mentioned the Rangers' top guys. We finally saw Panarin kind of get active, had a couple assists in that loss in Game 4. But Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, they've been quiet this entire series. Is it one of those things of like Rangers fans should feel okay because their stars have not been great, or is it almost one of those things that like Barkov, Forsling, those units are so good defensively that maybe they're not going to get production out of these guys?
I think it's the former. I would be over the moon if I was a Ranger fan and the series was 2-2 going back to the Garden. Honestly, like you want to outplay the opponent, you want to be the better team, but if you've perhaps taken their best shot and you haven't given your best shot, that's what you're thinking at least. And it's 2-2. You'd think, okay, our best shot is still coming, and you would expect that these guys would start coming around. And I do think we are overlooking the other side of the equation, which you sharply noted, right? Like the Panthers are really good. So they have one of the best two-way forwards in the league. Gus Forsling is a star defenseman. So they have the tools to slow these guys down. It's not that they're just cold. They're just struggling because there's not much room out there. But if that opens up for the Rangers, like they all of a sudden like the scale kind of tilts in their direction. If either one of these guys gets going, and they are correlated because they play on the same line, and a lot of their success is derived from one another. So if one gets going, that probably means he takes the other one with him. So yeah, I would feel in terms of winning the series like totally fine because you haven't seen the best from those two guys yet, and it's 2-2.
Yeah, definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on, and we'll see if they can get it going. But Barclay Goodrow obviously playing hero ball on the ice, and same with Lafreniere. But let's talk about darts now because this is like Michael Leboff's favorite time of year. I know Madison Square Garden. I'm assuming you're coming to this event, at least stopping by. May 31st to June 1st, the U.S. Darts Masters is in town. Give us the lowdown on who's who of darts, and are you coming?
Yeah, I should be there hopefully Saturday. But yeah, it's a great tournament. I was so shocked with how electric the atmosphere was. I thought maybe, I've been over there in England for the darts, and it's just so much fun. And I didn't know if it would translate as well, but the Garden crowd last season was awesome. And even the players and the people who run the tournament were saying how great it was and that it really blew their expectations away. So it's a lot of fun, something you should check out, something you should absolutely watch. It's a fun sport to bet on because it's very quick. It's one-on-one. It's kind of like a very short version of tennis in terms of like the ebbs and flows. Yeah, and all the stars will be there. We got Luke Littler, who's a teenage sensation in the sport. He's 17. He was the runner-up at the World Championships last January as a 16-year-old. He then won the Premier League of darts as a 17-year-old last week. He's the co-favorite with Luke Humphries. The guy beat him in the World Championship. He's like 24, 25 himself, so not too long in the tooth. Those two guys are the stars of the sport right now. The old hand Mike Van Gerwen, it's kind of like the Tiger Woods of darts. He's your third favorite. He won this event last year. He's won everything, so he's always a lot of fun. Great crowd, great walk on. The crowd gets into it. Green lights and Seven Nation Army, but. The two guys I'll bet to win the tournament are Michael Smith, Bully Boy. He's 9-1. His best game is probably as good as anyone on the planet when he's scoring and is actually on form. He won the World Championships 2 years ago. He's famous for that 9-darter in that World Championship that went viral at the time. He's in a really, really, really good score. He's so hard to handle if he's on, and the format of this sport of this tournament kind of helps with that because it's just match after match basically for these guys. And the other player I'm going to look to back is Rob Cross, who's 16-1. It's just a numbers play. He's just his top game is as good as the Van Gerwens and Gerwin Prices of the world. Those guys are their odds are much shorter. So I like betting Rob Cross. He keeps a cool head. He's very cool and collected in pressure moments. He's a great finisher. So those are the two guys I like at bigger numbers rather than going with the favorites.
It's interesting. You mentioned Michael Bully Ball Smith, 9-1.
Bully Boy, yep.
Bully Boy, yeah. Rob Voltage Cross. So all these guys got nicknames. By the way, Luke Littler is Luke the Nuke. That's kind of a basic one. They got to get a better nickname for him. That's just like, oh yeah, let's see what we can rhyme. But you called yourself, or I guess you named yourself Mike the Anxiety Leboff as your darts nickname if you had to give one. I figured you would be Mike plus money Leboff because you look back at your best bet on the Rangers game. You couldn't settle for the 1.5 on like a normal vig line. It had to be no goals plus 3-1 or better. You're always outlining everything you can do. I was told that you have a nickname for me that I have yet to hear.
Yeah, if I had to give you one, the first thing that came to my mind would be Dally from the classic film and book The Outsiders. You look just like Dally, I think. Poor man's Dally, I would say. You're not as good looking as Matt Dillon, so don't get carried away. But that would be me, Charlie.
I'm going to take it and going to say that you are complimenting me because that's something that I don't get often from you.
Yeah. You'd be the if there was a like low budget, very off Broadway version of The Outsiders played, maybe at like a local high school or something, you could definitely play Dally.
Well, I can get into some short film acting. You know what? Maybe you'll see me on Broadway one of these days, Leboff. But thank you so much for hopping on. Enjoy the darts this weekend and enjoy your scoreless first period.
Thanks.
And just a reminder that any picks that we give out here on the show, like the ones you heard from Leboff, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. And that's all for Green Dot Daily on this fine Thursday. I'm Charlie DiSturco. Thanks for watching. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. The show back here tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. A reminder, Action Island for Game 5 between the Mavericks and the Timberwolves coming up shortly on our YouTube at 5 p.m. Eastern. Best of luck. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.